It's about not necessarily labeling the baby. It's about allowing the baby to decide what gender that baby wants to be when that baby can decide, which is around 4 years old.
He's got a 5-year-old's understanding. He knows that mummy's going to a special doctor and the doctor's going to take her ducky away.
Which is what he calls it.
Yeah.
That baby can decide, which is around 4 years old.
And he turns around to me and went, "You're going to get a ducky and you're going to be able to stand up and wee. And I'm not going to be the only one." So he's got a 5-year-old's understanding.
So from 0 to 4, the baby will not be labeled. The labeling theory will not apply from 0 to 4 years old. The baby will be a theyby, neither a boy nor a girl.
Theybies. I've seen this phrase being thrown around more and more over the past few months. Parents who refuse to disclose their child's gender, raise them as gender neutral, and then expect them to make this huge decision about whether to be transgender or not during childhood, all while claiming it's all completely the child's own choice. I found articles, news stories, and even celebrities such as Pink, and more recently Celine Dion glamorizing it. No wonder new parents are starting to follow suit. Celine Dion even recently released an expensive gender-neutral baby clothing line and weird promotional video where she blows some kind of gender-removing dust on a bunch of babies, much to the delight of BuzzFeed. And let's be clear, we aren't talking about parents letting kids wear whatever clothes take their fancy or play with trucks or dolls as they see fit. We're talking about parents who hide their child's biological sex, often even from the child themselves, and forcing them to choose whether to be cis or transgender at an age where they have no idea what that even means. When I was 4 or 5, I wanted to be a cat. I'd crawl around and play with our cats while meowing. I'm only grateful my mother didn't think to throw some ears and a tail onto me. Before we get stuck in, let's clear one thing up. We're not here to have a dig at anyone who's genuinely transgender, or people who are suffering from gender dysphoria. We're here to take a look at the parents who force their children into a life of confusion and unnecessary hardship, for what can only be to make themselves feel different and special. Designer gender-neutral children, if you will. Because nothing says this is completely normal, like selling your story to anybody and anyone who will listen. Speaking of selling your story to anyone who will listen, let's take a look at the completely normal Sharp family. We know how normal they are because Mr. Sharp makes sure to tell us at the start of the video.
Are we a normal family? We have 2 kids, order Domino's for dinner sometimes.
All right, I'm ready to go.
In many ways, we fit the kind of normal stereotype.
And of course, we all know that whether or not you order Domino's pizza is a measure of how normal a family is.
Our kids, Caden and Zyler, are 3.5 years old, and we're raising them using they, them, their gender-neutral pronouns so that they can decide for themselves when, if, and how they want to identify as a gender.
And how about if they decide that they rather wouldn't have had their lives unnecessarily complicated by having this special genderless status forced upon them?
So I think that knowing the sex or the gender of your child is important to other people, partially just because it's part of the social script. They don't notice that they're any different from any other children because they have no idea that some children are she and some children are he.
All right.
So at an age when these children are too young to care or understand anything about gender, you, the parent, are making it an issue.
A lot of young girls are, when they grow up, they're told, don't get dirty, don't do that, that's not safe, be careful, those kinds of things. And then they grow up to think that they're not capable of doing all these things. And then the young boys are told, oh, don't cry, you're okay, be strong. And then they aren't comfortable having emotions, which can cause a lot of problems when they're older.
Okay, so the reason you decided to confuse the hell out of your children is because you don't want to tell them they have to act like stereotypical little boys or girls. I know this is going to blow your mind, but boys can be sensitive and girls can play in the mud without having to strip away their gender. I grew up in the countryside, and there was barely a day went by where I wouldn't come home from playing caked in mud from head to toe, to the extreme of my mother often stripping me at the door and ushering me straight into the shower. I climbed trees, played with toy cars, and watched racing with my dad religiously, all while maintaining a female gender.
Gender is not something that we have discussed with either of them at all, really.
We're as nervous about that as most parents are about how our baby's made.
They haven't really asked about it, so we're waiting until that question comes up.
Of course they haven't asked about it. Children of that age do not and cannot understand about gender, nor should they have to. I think that's quite enough of the Sharp family. Let's have a look at another example. Raising Zoomer is a blog, which has been the feature of many of the articles I found on this topic. The woman who runs it to my complete surprise, is a sociologist specializing in gender and sexual health. It really shouldn't shock anyone then that she is pushing this life on her own child. This mother blogs about her special gender-creative child's day-to-day life and advises others on how to raise gender-creative children of their own. There is far too much here for one video. Maybe we'll talk about it some more in a future video. But she discusses everything from special hairstyles, because we can't be having normal hairstyles in case people think our kids aren't special, right? To how worried she was in the hospital that they might assign her kid a gender, and many topics in between. She's even given a TEDx talk on the topic, because it's obviously all about little Zoomer and not just the virtue signaling opportunities. The TEDx talk is far too long to go through entirely here, so I'm just going to pick out some of the more relevant parts. However, I will leave a link in the description for those interested in the entire talk.
Most of us want a world without gender inequality, but it's going to take us all being honest with ourselves about how we reinforce it. If equality is what we want, we have to create it.
Up until this point in her talk, she has mostly set the stage by talking about gender inequality, linking it all back to raising children with gender stereotypes. At this point, she's assumed that we're all on board with her that this needs to be changed, and that there is no more difference between the genders than there is between hair or eye color.
Not long ago, something changed inside of me, quite literally. I was pregnant. And pregnancy and impending parenthood made me think differently about the world I studied, the world my child would be entering. I considered all of the information I had about the harmful impacts of gender inequality, and I understood that my child's gender identity would be up to them, not me.
And yet the first thing she did for them was to assign them a gender-neutral gender identity.
I couldn't stomach the idea of placing my kid in the girl box or the boy box and then sending them down a path that I knew could be constraining.
First of all, you don't put your child in the boy box or girl box. They are born biologically as one or the other. Sure, there's always a chance they could grow up to be one of the small percentage of people with gender dysphoria, but why on earth would you hope to force that unnecessary hardship for them? It certainly doesn't seem to be in the child's best interest, and at that age it's definitely not their choice.
I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if we could opt our kids out of gender stereotypes? And the more I thought about it, this fantasy turned into a possibility. And then this possibility turned into a reality. I am now the very proud, very smitten parent of Zoomer Coyote. My husband and I decided to raise Zoomer to be gender creative.
So this poor kid gets his life complicated so that she can live her fantasy through them. Top class parenting there. I can see now how it's all about letting the kid choose.
We didn't assign a gender to Zoomer, and we don't disclose their sex unless it's necessary. And we use the gender-neutral pronouns they, them, and their. Like all babies, Zoomer needs food and sleep and clothes and love and attention.
And special pronouns.
And so many diapers. But we're giving Zoomer the freedom and encouragement to explore their interests and eventually self-identify as a girl or a boy or any other label they think fits.
I'm sure the kid is going to be encouraged to collect as many Tumblr labels as possible.
We trust that Zoomer will know who they are, just like everyone in this room knows who they are.
So, if all the non-gender neutral people in the room know who they are without the special upbringing, what exactly is the point in all this? That's about as much of Zoomer's mum as I can handle. Let's move on to some failed attempts at forcing kids to be gender neutral. So here we have a conversation between three fine parents on Twitter. Now, to be fair, they do call their kid daughter, so it can be assumed they haven't gone the full way of removing their kid's gender completely. However, they are trying to enforce their kids not following any gender stereotypes. Chris says, "We've actively tried to be gender neutral toy-wise with our kids, one of each, and it's such a losing battle. Sadness." Shannon responds, "Yeah, I can already see my daughter preferring pink, and I have no idea why, because we've worked so hard to avoid that." Joel adds, "Pink and Disney princesses. We tried to discourage them, but our daughter has gravitated towards both. And there was me thinking this was all about giving the child the freedom to choose. Yet these parents admit to actively discouraging their kids from playing with stereotypical toys for their gender, and are really distraught to find their kids interested in them regardless. It really does begin to look like it was less about giving kids the choice and more about desperately hoping for a transgender child. They are unable to contain their disappointment at their children gravitating towards ending up cis. It really does bear thinking about what kind of future awaits some of these children. Pushed into decisions they're too young to comprehend, the consequences of which could last a lifetime if the parents decide to start adding hormone blockers into the mix.